A young woman disappears. Her car found abandoned across a set of railroad tracks, still running, with the door open and a cell phone on the ground nearby.
The phone was the main thing that set me to think something's wrong.
A massive search effort by law enforcement, pushed by a mother determined to find her daughter, and a pair of shoes found neatly placed under a missing person poster.
I felt that they were placed there.
Was this someone getting rid of evidence, or a killer taunting their victim's family? An explosive text sent the day she disappeared cast a cloud of suspicion on the last person to see her.
I said, if you ever hear her hair on her head, I swear you're gonna regret it.
And additional missing women in the area lead many to wonder if they could all be connected. Hi, I'm Steph Green, and today we're talking about Cieha Taylor, who went missing on February 6th of 2020. It was 7 p.m. on February 6th when the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office received a call about a car that was blocking the train tracks on East Trapnell Road in the small town of Plant City, Florida. When the responding officer arrived, they found a black Toyota Solara parked across the tracks with the keys inside, the engine running, and the driver's side door open. On the ground next to the vehicle was a cell phone, and there was nobody around. In a move that has many people asking why, the officer picked up the phone, put it in the vehicle, and then moved the car off to the side of the road. Then they locked the door with the keys still inside and drove away, not even taking the time to run the plates and see who the vehicle was registered to or why it was left in such a state. If the officer had done so, we might be telling a very different story today, because the car was registered to Cieha Taylor and she had just gone missing.
Gratitude heals. By focusing our attention on the beauty of the journey in 5 o'clock traffic, we not only uplift our own spirits, but we can share that appreciation with others.
Cieha Taylor was a bright young woman who was full of life. She grew up in Dade City, Florida, which is about an hour outside of Tampa. Her family describes her as fun, spontaneous, curious, someone who loved to learn and investigate why things worked the way they did. Cieha was extremely intelligent, which turned out to be both a blessing and a curse. By just 4 years old, she could read, and her love of doing so would carry on throughout her life. And at just 16, she had graduated early. But her mom describes how she would get bored in school, which is common for those who don't feel challenged. This became problematic when Cieha went to college. She couldn't decide on a direction of study and would get bored and eventually quit going. It was around this time that Cieha began making some questionable decisions, including hanging out with a rough crowd and experimenting with drugs. Cieha's mom, Kenitha, didn't approve of the choices her daughter was making, and she's been really open about the strain it put on their relationship. But despite all of that, Kenitha still loved her daughter very much and communicated with her on a regular basis. By February of 2020, Cieha started making efforts to turn her life around. She had a steady job at a call center, and her mother had just purchased her a car for her birthday. But she was still battling with drugs and didn't have a place of her own. So she was living out of her car and couch surfing, primarily splitting her time between staying with her boyfriend, Jason, in Plant City, and her friend in nearby Lakeland. This is why when Cieha disappeared, it would take 3 days before people even realized she was missing. We don't know a lot about how Cieha spent the day of February 6th. What we do know is that she took her boyfriend Jason to work and hung out in the area waiting for him, picked him up when his shift was over, and drove him home. At the time, Jason was living with a friend at their parents' house, and according to them, Cieha was acting erratic that afternoon when she dropped him off. They reported that she left at around 4 p.m. and was planning to stay the night with her friend in Lakeland. This friend's name has been kept out of interviews, probably to protect her from people online. So we're just gonna call her Jane. Cieha called Jane at 4:45 that afternoon, and she later confirmed that when they spoke, Cieha didn't sound normal. I've even seen reports where she's described her as manic. But she also says that Cieha was upset because her and Jason had gotten into a fight that afternoon. Could this explain her erratic behavior, or was something else going on? All we know is that after this call, Cieha disappeared, and her car was found abandoned on the railroad tracks just over 2 hours later. But because the responding officer didn't take the time to look into the situation, her family still had no idea anything was wrong. How did Cieha's family finally discover she was in danger? And why would Cieha have to report her missing twice before the police finally started searching for her? Coming up, we're going to take a look at the days following Cieha's disappearance and what Cieha had to do to finally get the police to take her daughter's case seriously. But first, if you enjoy the true stories of real missing people, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. When Cieha didn't show up to Jane's house on the night of the 6th, she found it odd, but not enough to cause major worry. It wasn't unusual for Cieha to change plans, so it wasn't until 3 days later she finally realized there was cause for alarm when she got a call from Jason letting her know that Cieha's car had been discovered abandoned on the side of the road. That day, Jason's mom had come over to his house to drop off some clothes, and on the way, she spotted Cieha's car parked next to the railroad tracks, right where the police had left it. When she told her son and asked where Cieha was, Jason claimed that this was when he realized something wasn't right. So he called Jane to ask if she knew anything about it or where Cieha was. Jane and another friend immediately drove over to check things out. They called AAA to unlock the car, and that's when they knew something was definitely wrong. All of Cieha's belongings were in the car, including her clothes, purse, ID, debit card, and phone. And everyone in Cieha's life knew she didn't go anywhere without her phone.
Cieha always had her phone, tons of thousands of pictures, all the social platforms. It would be weird for anybody these days not to have their phone on them 24/7 all the time. So it's just weird to know that the phone was found where it was found at.
She always had her phone. If Cieha was in the shower, Cieha's phone was in the bathroom. If she was in there doing her makeup, her phone was in the bathroom with her. She had music playing. Something was going on, but she always had her phone. Always, always, always.
They decided to drive Cieha's car to her mom's house. And when Cieha saw all of her daughter's belongings still inside, she also knew something was very wrong. So she called the cops to report Cieha missing, kicking off her years-long battle to find out what happened to her daughter. A battle she is still fighting today. So how did the police respond to reports that Cieha was missing? Were they doing enough to find her? Cieha lives in Dade City, so it was an officer with the Pasco County Sheriff's Office who showed up to take the initial report. To say she was underwhelmed by his performance would be putting it nicely. The officer didn't even categorize the call as a missing person, instead just filing it as an incident report. There were even suggestions that Cieha had just gone off on her own or harmed herself. But Cieha knew this wasn't the case and kept pressing the police to investigate. She was eventually told that because of where the car was found, her daughter's case wouldn't fall under Pasco County's jurisdiction. So the next day, Cieha reported Cieha missing again, this time to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, who would take over the case. It's unclear exactly how they initially responded and the timeline of when the following events took place. If you listen to accounts by the Sheriff's Department, they make it sound like they threw every available resource at finding Cieha right away. But if you listen to her family, it sounds like that might not be accurate. They claim that they had to push the police to make progress and point to the fact that there wasn't even a lead detective on the case until the 16th, at which point Cieha had already been missing for 10 days. The Sheriff's Department has also refused to share information on who the officer was that initially found Cieha's car on the railroad tracks and why they didn't look into that situation. Regardless, we know that eventually the Sheriff's Department did conduct a thorough investigation into Cieha's disappearance. The first thing they did was tow her car in so it could be forensically processed.
We did a thorough search of the vehicle, evidence processing wise. I know that we actually had that vehicle on the 10th and continued to process it for several days, going back to it several times to include fingerprint processing, alternate light source processing, different forensic techniques to see if there's any clues left behind.
And were there any?
We recovered some fingerprints, but they were all known people to have been in the car. I know specifically that we were able to identify Cieha Taylor's fingerprints in the car. Her friends' prints that drove the vehicle to Dade City. That's not uncommon, nor would it raise a suspicion because these people obviously had been in the car in the past.
The police, along with family and friends of Cieha, would do multiple searches around the area where her car was found, using helicopters and canine units in the process. Officers collected and reviewed thousands of hours of surveillance video from nearby homes and businesses. They also interviewed everyone in Cieha's life and canvassed the area where the vehicle was found, knocking on doors and interviewing residents. They even put up a road sign and conducted a traffic survey.
On the 20th of February, we actually did a traffic survey in the area where we handed out over 500 flyers. The point of doing something like that is to Trapnell Road's a well-traveled road in Plant City. Most people would be driving it every day, either, presumably from work. And when this vehicle was recovered at 7 p.m., around 7 p.m. on the 6th, one would assume that the same people traveling that road might have saw something that day. So it was just to kind of get the word out to people saying, hey, what can we do to help you with this investigation?
Despite all their efforts, they didn't find Cieha or any leads as to what happened to her. In fact, their first break in the case wouldn't come until they received a phone call weeks after her disappearance, with a tip about something that was found just a few feet from where her car had been abandoned. Meanwhile, Cieha and her family weren't just going to sit around and wait for the police to find Cieha. They had launched their own investigation, going out and doing searches, talking to all of Cieha's friends, and harnessing the power of social media. They created the Finding Cieha Facebook page, and eventually an Instagram and Twitter as well. Cieha also leveraged the media and people with existing platforms. Not only would she do interviews with local and national news, she also reached out to podcasters and YouTubers who were known to cover missing person stories, asking them to do interviews and talk about Cieha's case. She even collaborated on a video with Kendall Ray, which has been viewed over 1.5 million times. Despite all these efforts by family and law enforcement, they still haven't been able to find out what happened to Cieha. But Cieha did get a call about a clue that has many people asking, what could it mean? On February 26, Cieha was contacted by the office manager at a strawberry distribution center just a few feet down the road from where Cieha's car was found. They had exchanged numbers during one of the searches, and she called because on her way back from lunch that day, she had spotted a pair of shoes near the entrance to their facility and thought she should let Cieha know on the off chance they were Cieha's. Immediately upon seeing a picture, Cieha knew they were because she was the one who had given them to her. So she contacted the detective on the case, who went out right away and took them into evidence. He noticed that these shoes were placed neatly on top of a drainage pipe, right underneath of a light pole, displaying one of Cieha's missing person flyers. Had they just been missed in searches of the area, or were they intentionally placed there for a reason?
Well, we searched it ourselves personally and those shoes weren't there.
Yeah.
So we know for a fact that someone put those shoes there because they were not there.
Did the shoes show any weathering? Because you had mentioned that it was rainy through some of that too, right?
The shoes didn't have, there was none on there.
Yeah.
Was this someone getting rid of evidence or trying to send a message to the family? And could it be someone who lived just down the road? With no other leads, suspicion mounts towards the last person to see Cieha, Jason. What did he tell police about her disappearance? And what was in the last text Cieha sent him that could point to a dark motive? Cieha and Jason met 5 years before she went missing. At first, it was just a casual fling, but it eventually progressed into something more during the last 2 years. But from the sound of it, the relationship was one-sided. While Cieha was in love with him and talked about getting married and having children, it seemed he didn't feel the same way. Both her friends and family have expressed that he didn't treat her well and that he was a factor in Cieha getting into drugs and making poor life decisions. So from the beginning, Cieha's been vocal about how she believes Jason had something to do with Cieha's disappearance. And the location of where her shoes and car were found just add to the suspicion. Cieha's car was found abandoned on the railroad tracks just over a mile down the road from where Jason was living. It's even closer if you were to walk along the tracks, which pass right behind the property. This also makes you wonder, why didn't he notice her car parked on the side of the road until his mom brought it up, given that he would have had to drive right by it to come and go from his home? But even if he didn't see her car, Cieha was missing for 3 days before he made that call to Jane. You would think that during this time, as her boyfriend, he would have tried calling or texting her, right? In an interview on the Brain Scratch podcast, Cieha and Kaya's sister-in-law Portia were asked about this and say during that time, he never tried contacting her.
In the 4 days before the missing persons report was filed, have you been able to verify that Jason called anyone asking where she was?
No, we haven't. We don't even know if he actually even called Kaya's phone. So that's also very strange. This is someone that you're talking to multiple times a day. You're hanging out with, during the daytime. And for you not to try and contact her for 4 days or be concerned about her whereabouts, that's also very strange and suspicious.
Are you hearing that from investigators, or do you have access to her phone records?
You know what? Well, I'm not going to be able to answer that due to protecting her case, but we do have confirmation that it did not happen.
What about the fact that Kaya told her friend that she and Jason had gotten into a fight that day? It's normal for couples to argue, but the people around Kaya say her and Jason would go beyond normal fighting, alleging that his treatment of her crossed over into abuse.
It was toxic. It was abusive. He would use her insecurities against her. He would call her names constantly. I saw it. I heard it. He would call her dirty. He would call her a demon. He would call her the N-word. He would say that she was wicked. Just the meanest things a person could say. He would just say them just because he could, just to hurt her, just to upset her.
Our investigation of him has shown nothing but negativity, almost as if this was a game to him.
Because there was domestic violence. We have racism quotes and documented things that show how he thought outside being with Kaya.
One of the things you heard there is that he could be racist towards Kaya, who is mixed race. These allegations are hard to ignore when his Instagram features pictures of swastikas, and the last text he allegedly received from Kaya mentions his affiliation to white supremacists. This hasn't been confirmed by law enforcement or Cieha in interviews. But while on the Addicted to Crime podcast, Kaya's sister Katrina shared what was in the last text Kaya sent to Jason on the day she went missing.
First I think, okay, with Kaya's last text message to her boyfriend saying, I see you sent your white supremacist friends to get me. You think you're smart, but I'm smarter.
So you can see why the family and so many people online have been suspicious of Jason from the beginning. And statistically, it's most often the case that when a woman goes missing or is murdered, that it's at the hands of their intimate partner. But the police have interviewed Jason more than once and have said he has been fully cooperative.
We've spoken to the boyfriend and his friend, and actually that friend's parents, whose house they were at that day, and the parents didn't have much interaction with her at all. Just basically saw her leaving, but from the interaction she had with her boyfriend and with the friend, she was acting not normally as she normally would. They described her as more erratic and possibly going through some type of mental crisis of some sort.
That clip is all that's been shared about their interviews with Jason, though it has also been reported that law enforcement has searched his home and property. As of right now, the police have not named Jason as a suspect, but they have also clarified that nobody's been ruled out. As of today, Kaya's case is still considered an open missing persons investigation, and anyone who has information pertaining to her disappearance is encouraged to contact the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office at 813-247-8200. There is currently a $15,000 reward being offered by Kaya's family and Crime Stoppers for any information that leads to them finding Kaya. Could there be another explanation for Kaya's disappearance? One that involves other missing women from Hillsborough County? While there's been plenty of suspicion towards Kaya's boyfriend, there have also been people wondering if her case is related to other missing women in the area. Less than a month before Kaya disappeared, Veronica Reyes Diaz also went missing under suspicious circumstances, including her vehicle being left behind with all of her belongings still inside. And she vanished less than 10 miles from where Cieha's car was found. Kaniva and other members of Cieha's family have been doing everything possible to keep the spotlight on her disappearance, including joining forces with Veronica's family to put pressure on law enforcement. In June of 2020, the two families organized a protest outside of the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office to voice their dissatisfaction over how detectives have handled the two cases. In response, the Sheriff's Office said they had a project in the works to get more information out about the disappearances of Veronica and Cieha. 2 months later, they announced that project was a podcast they were launching to bring attention to unsolved cases. And on August 10th, the first episode was released, featuring Cieha's story.
Our detectives work very hard to solve cases, but sometimes those cases go cold. We're hoping this podcast will help with that. These cases are extremely heartbreaking, even devastating to the families of these victims. We're hoping that this will generate new leads.
While this is a great idea to get information out and utilize the help of the public in unsolved cases, it didn't go over as well as they had hoped. The episodes were short, ranging from just 4 to 15 minutes, and sounded more like a news segment than a story that would captivate listeners. And it's hard to grow an audience for a podcast, so it didn't help when they named it Unfinished Business, which is already the name of a pretty popular podcast. Since then, the police haven't put out any more information about Cieha or Veronica's cases. And when asked for comment, they just point the media to their podcast. But both families continue to do interviews in an attempt to keep the spotlight on the two women and prevent their cases from being neglected. In May of 2021, over a year after Cieha and Veronica went missing, a third woman in the area disappeared, Kelly Vasquez. All three of these women are similar in appearance and have vanished under suspicious circumstances. And all three cases remain unsolved. Is this just a coincidence, or are they connected? And are the police not taking these cases seriously because they're women of color? Will these families ever get answers? I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Another case that got off to a slow start was that of Harmony Montgomery, a 5-year-old little girl who was missing for over 2 years before law enforcement finally paid attention. Then as they frantically worked to piece together what happened, they discovered a father with a violent past, a younger brother she was ripped away from, and a system that failed little Harmony at every turn. I'll put that video here, so click the link and I'll see you there.